Okay, good afternoon. Shabbat Shalom. On July 8th, it was kind of heating up outside. We had the rains yesterday, cool us down a bit. I think we were all glad to see that. And now we're going back to normal, hot and humid. Here, welcome to Texas, right? Well, today we're picking up in Ezekiel 35 where we left off last time. Now, where did we leave off? We left off. Let's see, where we are currently, verses 5 and 6, but where we're really going to pick up is in Genesis 26, or in Genesis, but where we left off in Ezekiel is verses 5 and 6. Briefly, we're just going to do a very brief recap on what's happened so far in this ongoing study. We have in Ezekiel 35, we have this prophecy from Yahweh against Edom, against the house of Esau. We've identified the house of Esau back in Genesis 36. We read three verses. Edom is Esau. Esau is Edom. Esau is Edom. So the prophecy against Seir, Esau or Seir, and what will happen to them, to the house of Esau, to Edom. In verses 3 and 4, we've got a synopsis, and the rest of the chapter after that gives us some detail about some of the other judgments, and other parallel passages of Scripture will do the same. But it brings up a question: why such a harsh judgment against these people? Why such a harsh judgment against Edom or Esau? Well, it's explained, as we read last time. It has to do with the ancient hatred in verse 5. Let me read that very quickly. Because you have had an ancient hatred and have shed blood of the children of Israel by the power of your sword at the time of their calamity, when their iniquity came to an end. This explains Yahweh's reasoning for the impending judgment for the rest of Ezekiel 35, but we're not going to discuss that today. Because, please note, in verse 5, the key phrase is the ancient hatred. Now, this has been some years, several generations later, the time of Ezekiel. Because where are we at in Ezekiel? A couple chapters earlier, we read about the city of Jerusalem being sacked and captured by the Babylonians. So we're already past that point. What's left is being deported. At the time Ezekiel's living this prophet, what's left is being deported, right? They're going back to Babylon. And yet here at this time, because of the judgment against Seir. Now, why this time? Well, one reason, we'll get to the reasonings later, but one of the reasons is the house of Edom actively took part in the capture of city. They didn't just cheer on the Babylonians. They actually joined up with them to help them capture and sack the city. But we'll discuss that later. So it's not so much of times past as it is the ancient hatred. This hatred that never died, it never went away. So that's what the phrase implies. So let's continue with this ancient hatred. Because last time we got up to the point where Jacob has taken Esau's birthright and his blessing. And Esau had said to himself that he was going to kill his brother Jacob. Jacob runs away. Now, but years later, as we see, let's go back to Genesis, please, because before we go on through the rest of the chapter in Ezekiel, and before we talk about the impending doom on Edom, let's talk. We need to get a better grip and have a better understanding of this ancient hatred, because in my review of this, it actually said quite a bit more than what I personally had anticipated. I'll say it. I'll come out and say it. So Genesis 36, I believe it is where we want to pick up. No, that's the family of Esau. But in Genesis 32 and 33 is when Jacob comes back home. The synopsis of Genesis 33. Jacob and Esau finally meet, but Esau spares him. Doesn't do anything harm to him. Why? Because Jacob is not yet Jacob. Because their father, their daddy, is not yet dead. He's still around. So he didn't hurt him. Or to try to do anything to hurt him yet. That's the key word. Yet. But what's interesting here is in the closing of Genesis 33. Let's pick it up in verse 14. We're going to read the last 3 or 4 verses here. He says, "Now please," this is Jacob pleading with Esau. "Now please let my master go ahead before his servant. I always sold it at a pace in which the livestock that go before me. So, and the children are able to endure until I come to my master and seer." Esau says, "Oh, come on, man. Here, let me give you some of my guys, of some of the people who are with me. You know, we can help. We can lend a hand here in this big cattle drive you got here." But he said, "Well, Jacob, but what need is there? Why? Please let me find favor in the sight of my master." So Esau agreed, and he returned on his way to Seir. Jacob, verse 17, journeyed to Succoth and built him a house there and made booths for his livestock, and therefore the place is called Succoth. It's evidently, very evident here, that Jacob doesn't quite trust Esau, does he? Because I read in a couple commentaries, and I did not make note of which ones they were. That's my mistake. I read in one commentary, it was out of a study Bible, that Esau, out of this passage, what did they glean out of this? They gleaned that Esau, well, he had this forgiving attitude while Jacob was evermore the bad deceiver. Wrong answer. As we go through this, we're going to see that's the wrong answer. Did Jacob deceive Esau again? Yeah, but this time it was to save his life, all his household, all his animals, all the people that were with him, you name it. He still knew about the death threat against him. We jump forward. We're going to do some brief readings. Just a few brief readings of the family of Esau here in Genesis 36. Because these names are going to be very pertinent very shortly. Genesis 36. Let's pick it up in verse 8, shall we? And this is the genealogy of Esau, the father of the Edomites in Mount Seir. These were the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Adah, the wife of Esau, and Reuel of Bashemath, the wife of Esau. I'm probably not saying these names right either, David. I'll tell you right now. I'm probably not either, so you're in good company. Neither are the names of Esau's sons. Eliphaz, okay, I just said it. Verse 11. And the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. And now Timah was a concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bore Amalek. I think we've heard that name, haven't we? She bore Amalek. We got a couple of heads nodding in this audience. I saw y'all. She bore Amalek to Eliphaz. These were the sons of Adah, Esau's wife. These were the sons of Reuel, Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Bezah. These were the sons of Bashema's wife Esau. Of Esau's wife Bashema. And these were the sons of, oh boy, this one's hard to me, Oholibamah, Esau's wife, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon. She bore to Esau Jeresh, Ja'alam, and Korah. Boy, that's a familiar sounding name, isn't it? Korah. Every time, why is it just me? Every time we read that name, there's always bad news surrounding it. Or is that just me? I got some head shaking. No. So it's not just me then. Okay. Okay, so what's the big deal? What's the big deal about these sons of Esau? Because as Esau, his nation grew. So they started out with the kings of Edom. You'll find that listed in Genesis 36, the kings that came out of Esau, verses 31 through 39. But the most prominent ones, actually, were as the household grew larger and larger, and instead of being just one single kingdom, they were divided up into, to keep the family for, evidently this was done to stop in-house fighting and decided amongst themselves, from the best I've been able to gather, the dukes of Edom, and they ruled different regions. They had their own little neighborhoods in which they ruled over. Yes, David?
It says here the name Korah means bald, barren, frozen over. So it's not a name that you would want to name a child.
Okay.
But I could be called Korah.
I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I still got plenty back here. So in two separate listings here, we read about the chiefs or the dukes of Edom. Some translations use chiefs, some use dukes. But because these names, we're going to read these names. And they said, well, we got to read all these names and stuff for. You'll find out. Bear with us in this study. You'll find out. As we go through this rest of the study, some of these names are going to reappear, and they're going to sound very familiar. These were the chiefs of Genesis 36, picking up in verse 15. For what it's worth, today's study is not going to sound too much like a sermon. It's going to come across more like a study, for what it's worth. But nonetheless, Genesis 36, verse 15. These are the chiefs of the sons of Esau. Eliphaz. Now these are the chiefs now. Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau, were Chief Taman, Chief Omar, Zepho, and Kenaz. Chief Korah, Chief Gatam, Chief Amalek. Here we go with Amalek again. Amalek grew up to be quite prominent, didn't he? And we're going to see he did. These chiefs were the chiefs of Eliphaz in the land of Edom, and they were the sons of Adah. And these were the sons of Reuel, Esau's sons, Nahath, Chief Zerah, Chief Shema, and Chief Mizah. So all these boys, these kids and grandkids, all grew up to be chiefs of some kind, didn't they? They were all the chiefs of Reuel in the land of Edom. And these were the chiefs of Bashemath, Esau's wife. And these were the sons of Aholibama, Esau's wife. Chief Jeush, Chief Ja'alam, and Chief Korah. And these are the chiefs who descended from Aholibama, Esau's wife, the daughter of Edom. And these were the sons of Esau, who is Edom. And these were their chiefs. Here we go, reading this again. We're being reminded again that Esau is Edom. Now, the more times we hear scripture, read a scripture, repeating something, the same thing, it has a tendency to become important, doesn't it? The more times something is repeated, the greater it becomes. We've read it 2 or 3 times in this chapter already. So we got another listing of chiefs. Let's start in verse 40, remaining in Genesis 36. These are the names of the chiefs of Esau, according to their families and their places. Chief Timnah, Chief Alvah, Chief Jesses, Chief Aholibama, Chief Elah, Chief Pinion, Chief Kenaz, Chief Taman, Chief Mibzar, Chief Megaldiel, and Chief Aram. These were the chiefs of Edom, according to their dwelling places in the land of their possession. and Esau was the father of the Edomites. So where was their dwelling place? Well, in another study, we'll talk about that more in detail. But where they started out, they moved into the neighborhood of the Horites. They're first mentioned in Genesis 14. And they moved into the Horites neighborhood and basically just took over the neighborhood. That's how the kingdom of Edom started. They just moved in and took over. And those seemingly that were spared intermarried in with the tribe and became part of them. Now, anyone have any idea why these names are going to be important? Because they're going to be important very shortly. David, I can see smoke rolling out of your ears. I know you're thinking.
I was just looking where they're located. It was south of the Dead Sea.
South of the Dead Sea, that's right.
Southeast of Jerusalem.
Southeast of Jerusalem. Now, because remember, the hatred didn't die out. It lived on through all these kids, grandkids, all these grandsons of however many greats of Esau. Not only during his time, but all the way into this time of Ezekiel. Because remember, it was only then that Yahweh pronounced his judgment against Edom. Now, let's take a look at a few examples of the violence Edom has done against the house of Israel. That is what Esau has done to Jacob over the years. Can we start, please, in Exodus 17? Exodus 17, no more than east. Remember, and here at this point, Exodus 17, we're not that far at all removed from Israel leaving Egypt, are we? We're only just a couple of chapters away from the drowning of the of the Egyptian army in the Red Sea. And we just the Israelites just started receiving bread from heaven. They just been watered from the rock. So, Exodus 17. Let's pick it up in verse 8, shall we? We're going to read verse 8 to the rest of the chapter. Now, Amalek came and greeted Israel with open arms, with a bouquet of flowers and a red carpet and a basket of goodies. No. Maybe I need to clean my glasses. Now, Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. So no more than they crossed the Red Sea, Amalek's coming out for a fight. Yes, Heather.
Rephidim means rest. We just studied this earlier today. It means rest.
It means rest.
Yeah.
That's what the name of that
They
is.
can't even take a break and stop and rest, and then without Amalek wanting to come out for a fight.
There you go.
And didn't we read this name 2 or 3 times? Back in Genesis 36, on how this grandson of Esau comes and becomes the chief. So at this juncture of the story, he grows up and he's a local tribal, he's a tribal king, tribal leader of some type, right? Talking about the number of years that went by. And Moses, verse 9, said unto Joshua, choose some men now and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of Yahweh in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. So when Moses held up his hand, then Israel prevailed. But when he let them down his hand, Amalek prevailed. Verse 12, but Moses' hands became very heavy. I mean, you can't hold them, just stand them up like this indefinitely, right? It's too hard for one man to do, especially at his age. Remember, he's over 80 by now. He's 80 by now or older. But Moses' hand became very heavy. So they took a stone and put it under him. And he sat down on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek with his people with the edge of the sword. With the edge of the sword. That's an interesting phrase, because before this study is said and done, we're going to come across this phrase a few times over. Do we remember? I seem to recall a verse in the Bible where Joshua says when he told Peter, put away your sword because why? Anybody?
By the sword, you die by the
You will die by the sword. Very telling. So that's not a new phrase, is it? Verse 14. Then Yahweh said unto Moses, now write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. So starts out here. Got a death, blot out the. Now, if we blot out the name from under heaven, what does that usually mean? When Yahweh blots out a name, what does that usually mean? Yes, terrible things, never good.
You're out of the book of life.
You're out of the book of life.
You're out of the camp.
You're out of the camp.
And eventually you're going to die.
And eventually you're going to die and be forgotten. Be no more remembrance of you. So that's remember here at this point it's just at Amalek. What about the rest of the house of Edom? Now, had they been wise, they might have taken this as a warning shot. Look, we're losing one of our brothers already. The rest of us need to just shape up. And that's what we're going to see, right? Wrong. David, you're shaking your head. You're such a pessimist. No, that's not going to happen. But you know what? David's right.
History repeats itself.
All too often. Moses built an altar and called its name Yahweh is my banner, and because he said Yahweh has sworn. Because Yahweh has sworn, Yahweh will always have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Now, he didn't say Israel. Now, Israel did have quite a few mix-ups with Amalek and the rest of the house of Esau, as we're going to see. But who is always going to have war with Amalek? Yahweh will always have war with Amalek. Because had the house of Amalek been wise, a later generation might have considered repentance, but they did no such thing, did they? Can anybody else think of another incident of any house of Edom having a beef with Israel? Let's try Numbers 20, please. Now, I've got a few listed, and I don't claim I caught them all. That's my disclaimer. It's occurred to me I probably missed one, or I may have missed one or two. This is Numbers 20, and we're going to pick this up in verse 14, Numbers 20. We're going to start in verse 14. We're going to go through verse 21. Now Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Thus says your brother Israel, you know that all the hardship that has befallen us, and how our fathers went down into Egypt. We all dwelt in Egypt for a long time, and the Egyptians afflicted us and our fathers. Now when we cried out to Yahweh, he heard our voice, and he sent the angel and brought us up out of Egypt. So here we are now in Kadesh, a city on the edge of your border. Now please let us pass through your country. We will not pass through the fields or vineyards, nor will we drink any water from their wells. But we will go along the king's highway. We will not turn aside to the right nor to the left until we have passed through your territory. Then Edom said to him, Thou shalt not pass. You will not pass through my land unless I come out against you with the sword. Oh, you want to come through? You're going to have to fight your way through. So the children... Now remember, he says this knowing about what his brother Jacob had gone through. What Israel had gone through, their time in slavery, how Yahweh had delivered them, and how he led them to victory over Amalek. How he gave the Amalek into their hand. And he's not saying, yeah, sure. Yeah, come on. No, he didn't learn his lesson either. So you'll not pass through my land unless I come out against you with a sword. So the children of Israel said to him, we will go by the highway. No, you don't understand. We're going to go by the highway. Now, if I or my livestock drink any of your water, then we'll pay for it. Only just let us pass through on foot and nothing more. See, they're trying to reason with him, right? Talking brother to brother, they're just trying to reason with him. Then he said again, you shall not pass through. So Edom came out against them with many men and with a strong hand. Thus Edom refused to give passage through the territory, so Israel turned away from him. So far, we've seen Amalek attack them, and we've seen Esau, another king of Esau, an unnamed king here, refuse to let Israel pass through. Let's try 1 Samuel 17. Flip a little bit forward. Fast forward to 1 Samuel 17, several years later, through all the judges. And this time, we are into the period of the kings. And at this time, David has just been anointed the king of Israel. I evidently wrote this down wrong because this is with Philistia, but nonetheless, believe it or not today, but before, maybe not today, but before this study is said and done, before we're said and done with this chapter, Philistia will in fact come into the mix here. Let us try a few pages over to 1 Samuel 30. 1 Samuel 30. First Samuel 30, verse 1. Now it happened, when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south in Ziklag and attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire. Here we go. David having trouble with Israel, having trouble with the Amalekites again. This time they're picking on the wrong guy. They're picking on David. He had taken captive the women and those who were there. This was during David's stay with the Philistines before the death of Saul. And taken captive the women and all those who were there, from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but they carried them away, and then it went their way. And fast forward to verse Let's fast forward to verse 9. Verse 8 is, so David inquires of Yahweh, he says, shall I pursue this troop, and shall I overtake them? David goes to the priest and asks him, he says, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail you will recover all. So David went, and he and 600 men who were with him came to the brook of Besor, where who stayed behind were left behind. But David pursued, and he and 400 men. And 200 stayed behind, who were so weary that they could not continue to cross the brook of Besor. Then they found the Egyptian in the field, brought him to David. They gave him bread, and he ate, and let him drink water. They gave him a piece of cake and gave him a piece of a cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his strength came back to him. He had had no bread nor drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. And David said to him, to whom do you belong, and where are you from? He said, I'm a young man from Egypt, the servant of an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because 3 days ago I fell sick. We made an invasion to the southern area of the Cherethites, the territory which belongs to Judah, and the southern area of Caleb, which is we burned Ziklag with fire. And David said, can you take me down to this troop? And he says, swear to me by your Elohim that you'll neither kill me nor deliver me to the hands of my master, and I will take you to this troop. When he had brought him down, there they were, all spread all over the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because all the great spoil which they had taken from land out of the Philistines and out from the land of Judah. They're partying over this. They caused all this trouble. They're capturing people, wanting to make slaves out of them. All their animals, all this raid, all this plunder, all this troublemaking they're doing, and they're partying about it. They're happy. And David attacks them from twilight until the next day. Not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. So when David attacks the ones that jumped on camels, rode away, they got away. The rest of them, so David recovered all that Amalek had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives. So we got more trouble here. Anybody have any thoughts, any questions on what we've covered so far? Any question, any comment? Yes, David. David, then Heather.
Heather, you can go first.
Okay, he says Heather first, okay?
Well, I'm thinking about 1 Samuel 15, where it's talking about how Saul was supposed to take care of the Amalekites. He was supposed to kill
Maybe I
them.
jumped over it. Maybe I missed it.
I'm just thinking David went and pretty much did what Saul refused, because he was rejected as king, and it was Samuel who went and killed, what is his name, Agag, the king.
Agag, yeah, I jumped right over that one. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. And so it just makes me think of how David did his best to take care of this problem that Saul left undone. But then when you go over to Esther, you have Haman, who's an Agite, a descendant, and he was
That's
trying to
right.
eradicate all of the Jews at that
That's
time.
right.
So
Maybe
it's,
the
so when we're not obedient and we make up our own rules and play our own games, it causes problems for generations to come. that we
That's
can't
right.
imagine.
Yes,
I
okay.
could just add to that, King Herod was an Edomite.
And King Herod was an Edomite.
Yeah, and what he did.
That's right.
Yes, got to take care of it at the very beginning.
Yep.
That's right. You're correct, Raquel. In the day of Joshua, King Herod was an Edomite. Israel was ruled by an Edomite. And he ordered all the firstborn of. That's right. He ordered all the kids under 2 killed. Okay, first we have David, then a hand up in the back.
Yes, so when Heather was speaking, I was going to say something similar.
Go ahead,
to
go
that.
ahead.
So just to add on to Miss Sister Heather, it is true. When we make the choices that we make, we procreate either generational blessing or either generational curses, and we have to be mindful of the choices we make, because we end up causing ourselves to have protracted failure or protracted success. I yield.
That's right, because Saul didn't finish off Amalek, David got left with a problem, but a lot of them ran away, didn't they? So he's a rascal of first David, then Larry, then Robert.
Well, I'm going to the next conflict, so if you guys wanna talk about this, go before me, cause I got another conflict that kinda happened.
Okay.
Okay, Larry,
I was gonna say, Amalek, they did not have a dispute over land, okay?
no, it wasn't about land.
It wasn't about land, it was just a hatred of.
It's that they were alive.
Yeah, because they were alive. But remember, the Amalekites, I can't even say their name, Amalekites, remember, they were steeped into false worship. They were into child sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
They were into murderous sport. In other words, like the gladiators, they enjoyed it for sport.
Yeah,
There was
pretty much.
widespread sexual deviance, okay, in there. And so, there was different ones that were told to destroy Amalekites. And Saul fell. And yet, it was he who died because of that. He was pierced by, an arrow. And yet, while he was still alive, before he died, there was a young man that came and he asked for him to run him through with a sword, which he did. And guess who he was? That he was an Amalekite, yeah. And so David killed him for that.
Robert?
Yeah, I'm glad that you went into the genealogy because this all began with hatred for a brother.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the Amalek took on the worst because
Yes.
of all the descendants of Esau, Amalek took on the worst. And therefore he became a perpetual enemy to Israel. And so, therefore when we get to like Psalm 83 and
Oh, yes.
and Obadiah,
Oh, yes.
you can see how they joined all the other enemies and also the judgment of Yahweh that comes against Esau or Edom, or Seir, Mount Seir. So it all began with hatred for a brother.
That's right. Psalm 83 is going to be very prominent before we are said and done.
And even
Okay.
that made me think about Cain and Abel.
Right.
Stuff.
Right.
Pretty much, yeah.
I was gonna say what my husband said. I was gonna mention the Cain and Abel, that we either
Okay.
choose to be Abel or we can
I
choose
mean,
to
he's-
be Cain.
I mean, these people are out doing the Hatfields and McCoys, right?
Worse.
Only much worse. At least the Hatfields and McCoys made peace. Eventually. They came to a truce, or an armistice, if you will. David.
So, if I'm reading you correctly, we're starting back with Jacob and Esau, and then as time progressed, Edom was southeast of Jerusalem. Theoretically, when Judah and northern tribes were taken away, who would have migrated into their area? The Edomites would have been, perfectly positioned to be like the successors of the land at that time. And when they were released from Egypt, then who was there to oppose them? And so my next conflict that I was thinking about, when Zerubbabel was actually commissioned to build the second temple, all of the people in the area was like, hey, let us help you build. And he's like, no, can't let you help us because, Moabites, Ammonites, and certain people were not allowed in the temple. Edomites.
Various Edomites.
They're not allowed in the temple for the 10th generation because when they came out of Egypt, they did not bring and receive them with open arms and give them bread. They basically fought against them. And that is the reason why they hated them so much, because they refused to allow them to help with the temple. So they did everything they could to stop them from building the temple because they couldn't be a part of it. And so it just kept progressing from there on, the hatreds between. And going back to, I think what Heather said is, Yahweh told them to eradicate all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of all of them. He gave them 400 years to repent, and they never did. And the fact that they didn't do that, they still became a thorn in their side.
Right.
Forever.
Mm-hmm. That's right, David. Because it's occurred to me, and I'm sure it has you too, and several of you, rest of y'all out there, or several of y'all anyway, that their intention was never to really help. They didn't want to help build a temple. They wanted to help build a temple. Their idea was to stop it from happening. Yes, Heather.
Maybe somebody knows the exact scripture, but I think it's in either Numbers or Deuteronomy where it says you can't hate an Edomite.
You're not to abhor an Edomite.
Yeah, or an Egyptian, because they held them in bondage, and Edom
That's
is your
right.
brother. So they're commanded not to hate these people. So they're having to literally be the better people
That's
through
right.
the whole thing, even though they keep trying to kill them. And it's kind of reminds me of Yeshua is like, love your enemies, you know,
Mhm.
love your neighbor as yourself. And he's ordering us to love those who try to kill us.
You understand very well. It's an old thing, then and now. It's that's well within the character of an almighty being, eternal being, who says, I do not change. He expected it then, he expects it now. Robert.
Yeah, as she was reciting that, what we spoke on earlier when Joshua prayed for, says, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Again, those who know and bear the knowledge of Yahweh, those that know the truth, and those that are in the darkness and are blind and know not what they're doing. So they're acting according to the fleshly nature and character, whereas we are responsible to walk in the character and nature of Messiah Yahshua. So it's a tall order to overcome our fleshly
Very
desire.
tall order. Very.
Although the Amalekites are not an established people anymore, okay, we have to remember their mindset.
Right.
Their mindset is well and alive, especially in the Middle East, okay? Although the nation of Israel does not live by the Torah and does not have Yahweh as its king, but the nation of Israel exists, but the nations around it that made up those ancient people, they still have that great animosity toward the modern nation of Israel.
It's like they don't care, doesn't it?
No, they don't have to have a reason.
It's like either they have no will to make the distinction, or they have or no ability to do it. It's like, even if they could, it's like, what do we care? Yes, Raquel.
Yeah, I just want to read in Obadiah that basically talks about the influence behind the Edomites, right? So if I go to Obadiah 1,
Go ahead.
3, and I'll just skip parts of it. Behold, I will make you small among the nation. You shall be greatly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you. Now just skip down. Whose habitation is high. You who say in your heart, who will bring me down to the ground? Then you ascend as high as the eagle, and though you set your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, says Yahweh, right? And then that sounds very similar to, if you go to Isaiah 14:12,
Mhm.
the fall of Lucifer, right?
That's right.
How you are fallen from heaven, right? And if I go down to like 13, for you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of Yah. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation, scary, on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest depths of the pit. I mean, those are very similar language.
Well, see, they didn't believe their mighty one, their God, their being, their deity would in fact be Lucifer, wouldn't it? No matter what of
It
it.
goes to what you were just saying.
And that sums it all up very well. They have the heart of Lucifer. The parallel is just too tight, it's too good, too perfect. Only light side, dark side, right, David? Applies to the dark side as well. Okay, so we won't go to Obadiah. Raquel already covered that for me. Thank you, Raquel. That's all right. I got Obadiah in my notes. That's all right.
Cover that.
That's right. Let us try. Let's try back up to Ezekiel 25, shall we? Let's try Ezekiel 25. Let's see what Ezekiel has to say. Ezekiel 25. Let's pick it up in verse 12. Not 35, 25. Ezekiel 25. Verse 12. Because we have a listing of nations here. Starting the previous chapter, or starting this chapter and several chapters going forward. And Robert brought it up earlier about Psalm 83. Several of these nations are listed in Psalm 83. So let's pick it up in verse 12, what it says about Edom. Thus says Yahweh, because of what Edom did against the house of Judah, by taking vengeance, has greatly offended by avenging itself on them. Therefore, says Adonai Yahweh, I will stretch out my hand against Edom, cut off man and beast from it, and I'll make desolate from Teman, and Dedan shall fall by the sword. Teman and Dedan, didn't we read those names back in Genesis 36? A couple of heads nodding in the back. You know what? Y'all remember very well. Thank you, Matthew. You remembered very well. Got a couple of heads nodding back. Yeah, Teman and Dedan. That's right. These kids, grandsons, however many greats of Esau, right? Those names specifically were mentioned. Kids, yes, David.
If you think about it, how Yahweh set up the structure of the land, putting Benjamin and Judah at the bottom, and I can't remember, Naphtali, whoever is at the top.
Dan and Naphtali.
Yeah, he is describing how even in Edom, in that nation, there was a group of people that were above and a group of people that were below the entire region. And so from region to region, top to bottom, side to side, or whatever, he's going to cut all of them off.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. What else do we have in store here? Let us try another conflict.
Read 14.
What?
Read 14.
Read 14? Did I? Oh. Verse 14, I don't recall.
Yeah, you stopped at 13.
Oh, I did? Okay. All right, let's see. Dedan, and I will lay my vengeance on Edom by the hand of my people Israel, that they may do in Edom according to my anger. And according to my fury, that they will know my vengeance, says Yahweh. Finally, at some point in time in the future, the job's going to get finished. The job he gave on the, let's see. How many people were told to eliminate Amalek and Esau and all these, and it never happened? They didn't do it. So we looked at the Middle East, and here we are today. So at some point in time in the future, somebody, somewhere, somehow is going to finish the job. A job that was commissioned millennia ago. Yes, Heather.
I'm sorry. It makes me think.
About how he basically says in 12 that he's upset with Edom and Esau because they avenged themselves.
Right.
They're
That's
over here
right.
avenging themselves. They're not waiting on y'all. They're just avenging themselves, and they keep failing. And it's like the saddest. I mean, like imagine being so dead set on killing somebody, and you keep failing every time you try. And it's because that is also Yah's vengeance in a way, right? Is that you just keep aggravating yourself. You can't ever do what you're setting out to do. You know? I mean, in a way, it's almost like that would be so frustrating that they continuously fail. Is that something that we deal with in our lives when we start trying to avenge ourselves and advocate for ourselves instead of letting Yahweh fight our battles?
The
then we're
question applies.
frustrated.
It's a valid question.
Yes.
Your principle applies very well, Larry.
Yeah, because as we get into the latter part of this, in verse 17 of chapter 25, it says, and I will execute on them great vengeance and rebukes of fury. And when I put my vengeance on them, they will know that I am Yahweh. So there's going to be a time that all the things that Yahweh prophesied and demanded to take place will take place. And there will be a great day of vengeance on the day of Yahweh. And it may only come to fruition when there's a great rider on a white horse with a sword that takes execution in the latter
And that's who,
times.
at the end of the day, that's who we're gonna see is gonna finish up the job.
That's right.
Yahweh will say, okay, I'll do it myself. He'll commission his son to do it. But that's later. We'll read up on that later. I want to keep a little suspense going. Yeah, we got to save something for the end. Let's try Ezekiel 36, verse 5. I don't have these listed in order. I put them down as I found them. Okay, I'll be straight with you. Ezekiel 36, verse 5. And I evidently wrote this one down wrong because it's 36.
That's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
Therefore, this says Yahweh Adonai. Surely I have spoken to my burning jealousy against the rest of the nations. I'm looking across the wrong page. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's why I confused myself. Looking across the page. Therefore, says Adonai Yahweh, I surely have spoken in my burning jealousy against the rest of the nations, against all Edom, who gave my land to themselves as a possession, and who hardly joined spiteful minds in order to plunder its open country. Yeah, the intention that was the intention. It was in part about land, in part, but not so. But the main beef seems to be that they were alive, that Israel was alive in the first place. But yeah, they wanted their blessing back, and they wanted their birthright back, and they think they can do it just by killing off Jacob. That's what it appears. What it seems to be, doesn't it? Let's back up to Ezekiel 3:15, please. Like I said, I wrote these down in the order in which I found them. Ezekiel 3:15. And I can't. And that's not. I wrote something down wrong. That's certainly not it. Anyway, let's try one in Joel 3:19, please. Joel 3:19. Chapter in which Yahweh lays down judgment against the nations. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom shall be a desolate wilderness, because of the violence against the people of Judah, for they have shed innocent blood in their land. Let us try. Jeremiah 49. Verse 7. Verses 1 through 6, recording the judgment against Ammon. Let's see what it says here against Edom. Jeremiah 49, verse 7. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, is there no wisdom in Taman? Didn't we hear that name before, earlier in the study? When we read Genesis 36, Taman? I think we did. I know we did. Because I got a few heads nodding in the back. Has counsel perished from the prudent? Has wisdom vanished? Flee, turn back and dwell in the depths, O inhabitants of Dedan. We read his name too, didn't we? I'll bring this calamity upon Esau. This time I will punish him. That's the time I will punish him. Verse 10, if I have made Esau bare, and I have uncovered his secret places, he shall not be able to hide himself. Because his descendants are plundered, his brethren and his neighbors, and he is no more. If we fast forward to verse 13.
What was the practice of casting lots?
Cat.
Is that computer? It's
Oh.
computer. Keep going.
Okay. Okay. Verse 13, remaining in Jeremiah 49. I have sworn by myself, says Yahweh, that Bosra shall become a desolation, a reproach, a waste, and a curse, and its cities will be perpetual wastes. We read that name too, didn't we? I think we did. There are several names, so this is why. We go through, now remember, I don't claim we've gotten them all, but all the trouble that Jacob, all the verses that denote a lot of the trouble that Jacob has had with Edom, various houses of Edom. Several of those names appeared back in Genesis 36. Bosra, Dedan, Taman, and a few others. And we're going to see later, when we discuss the exact, next time we'll have some type of a discussion, I'll give some type of presentation on exactly where this is, where Esau's neighborhood is. But I'll give y'all one clue. David was correct as it went southeast from Jerusalem, from the Dead Sea. Because we're going to see several of these names and places. If you'll check them on a map, you'll see that's this house of Esau. By its different tribes and locations, this place, because remember, that's what it said, by their names and places in Genesis 36. You're going to see in places like southwest Iraq, Jordan. You're going to see it east of the Dead Sea, which brings us into a good bit of Saudi Arabia. Yes, Larry.
It's interesting because the names we're talking about, Taman and Dedan, okay? Taman is what's of the nation of Yemen.
In Yemen, that's correct.
And Dedan is a section of what is today Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
And although we don't see Saudi Arabia necessarily fighting against Israel today, we know that they're not amicable to them by any means. And yet, look at Yemen, the nation of Yemen today. It's just a war zone.
Mm-hmm.
And they're exporting terrorism.
They still have their own family feuds in there in Yemen. Yes, Robert.
Right. When he mentioned that, it made me think about when Esau went to his uncle Ishmael, and you can imagine the conversation in there where Esau's complaining about what his brother did to him, and Ishmael saying, you know, your dad did the exact same thing to me, you know, and possibly the relationship that developed from that, because remember Esau did marry daughters of I think Ishmael, did he not? Was it Ishmael?
One of them, I believe,
One-
the others were Canaanites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first ones were Canaanite, and then to please his parents, he went to a relative to marry, and it was Ishmael. So you can imagine the conversation they had. So, and we remember how Ishmael felt about, you know, Isaac. So.
Anyone else? David.
Yeah, I was gonna Let's tag on to Heather's response of, if we hold on to hatred, if we hold on to bitterness, if we hold on to grudges or people that especially are considered Yahweh's children, people that call on the name, none of it's gonna come to fruition because they're protected by Yahweh. And whatever you try to do to them, it's never gonna come true because vengeance is His. And a lot of times we can't get past that, what I wanna do. Well, I'm mad, so I wanna do this, I'm mad. If Esau relatives would have just let it go, they probably would not have been wiped out. They probably would have came, to the knowledge of Yahweh and lived in the land peacefully with their brethren. But the fact that they couldn't let go, they got wiped out, or they had to suffer the consequences. Do we look at that in our lives? Do we look and say, if I don't let go of this bitterness, eventually I am going to suffer the consequences? It took them over 400 years to suffer consequences. How long will it take in your life? It could be you're 80, 90 years old, and then consequences hit you because you still wouldn't let go of that bitterness. So we have to let go of the hatred, bitterness, strife, love your brother, love all, and then that's what Yahweh commands.
Okay, go ahead.
As Brother David was speaking about Yahweh and about bitterness, you have to be mindful of the seeds we plant, because the seeds we plant are the seeds we reap back.
That's
on the
right.
harvest, on
That's
what
one of the
sown.
lessons we reap out of
This
this.
goes back to the scriptures, we reap what we sow.
And it never changes.
It does, amen. So you want the abundance of harvest on good things rather than the abundance of curses, generational curses. We want to go back to generational divine blessing.
Robert?
In this, you can almost see on a physical level the unpardonable sin, because remember, Abraham taught his household, that included Ishmael as well as Isaac, and then Isaac taught his household. And so when you have tasted of the goodness of Yahweh and you've been partaker of these things and then turn away, so Esau turned away, and we see the result because of his hatred. Remember, the adversary in his rebellion had hatred, and so he took on that character and nature, and so we can see that Esau is cut off, Edom is cut off. All of these people, and all these passages we're reading about Yahweh's judgment against and the wrath that He has against this, and He's cutting them off from Him. So just on a physical level, I'm saying, you can almost see elements of what this separation from Yahweh looks like. It's His expression of His wrath against Edom and Seir.
To add to what you're saying, if you look at the characteristics of Edom, Esau, the Amalekites, all these different people, when you look at how their characteristics are, they're almost everything that Yahweh hates. And
Hates
that's why
everything
he's-
that Yahweh
That's
hates.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely spot on. It is full agreement with the Proverbs. It covers everything Yahweh hates.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Larry.
So, we can also turn around and look at the world today. The world is like Amalekites,
Mhm.
okay? They
Spirit of
don't-
Amalek, yeah.
Yeah, they don't worship Yahweh. In fact, they hate the name of Yahweh. There's churches across this world that if you say the name Yahweh, they will turn against you very quickly. And certainly don't use the name of Yeshua. Let's use the pagan Greek name Jesus, okay? You don't want to use the name Yeshua because they turn against you. And don't keep the Sabbath, we got to keep it on Sunday. So these people around the world hate the truth. They hate those who keep the truth. And so the world is very much like that ancient nation that hated Israel.
To what you're saying, it makes me think of the verse that says that some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but I will trust in the name of Yahweh. And when I came here, I didn't say Yahweh or Yeshua. I just said God and Jesus. And what's interesting about that is I talked to Kristen and asked her testimony, and then I did research on it. And I find that Jesus is very similar in Hebrew to horse. And that immediately convicted me, because I'm like, well, some trust in, chariots and some trust in horses. So what is the name?
Anyone else?
I just want to say thank you for sharing. I'm so blessed by this. I may say for myself.
More than welcome.
Lucy?
And we also have a nest up high in the heavens too.
We'll cover that, yeah. We're gonna be, we'll cover that a little bit next time, too.
I'm like the present.
No, we're out of time for
Lucy's ahead
It's
of
like every
all
time.
of us.
I'll make it a point to cover that, because I think that's gonna fit in with what's left of the. Yeah.
What did you say, woman of God, woman of God? I didn't hear you. What did you say?
Oh, that we
Okay,
also
so we'll
have
close here, and we'll be back next time. Let's see, we'll be back this time, 1 o'clock next week with Larry with the study. And the Johans will have the sermon.